And deletion of records for government documents. They want to delete these things after 15 days or 30 days, depending on certain circumstances and things like that. And, well, that's not transparent. That is just erasing history in real time, which is not good. Because if you send an email that says, oh, yeah, don't worry about that GC strategies, how many millions did they want? Let's send them on the millions that they want. Or how about tanks, right? How many tanks do you think we'll need against these protesters? And then they could delete those things after 15 days. That's less than ideal because you can't hold those people accountable. And that's, again, not what we want to get into. The UK is canceling elections because Starmer thinks he's going to lose, and probably correct. But these are also local councils that have not initiated the election process in time, and people are getting upset about that. And that's interesting to watch. What's going on with the democracy when the supposed people who are supposed to be representing that democracy don't follow the rules of that democracy. It's weird. It's a very, very strange thing that's happening. Gun confiscation announcement. The gun buyback program is going live today, probably. Usually they don't announce things on Saturday, but Anna Sangri is announcing today some update or some rollout of this program. It wasn't a success in Nova Scotia, but yet they're going to do this anyway. So, I mean, not to say I'm shocked because our government barrels headfirst into terrible policy decisions, but here we are again, watching it happen over and over again. It's some kind of punishment, I'm sure of it. Scott Moe likes the China deal. New World Order at all. Oh, yeah, New World Order. I know what you mean now. I've got a video of Mark Carney being asked about the New World Order, and it's word salad. Trump, unfazed by the China deal, he says, yeah, well, that's what you should do when if you can get a deal with China, you should get a deal with China. Okay, Greenland's going to get a deal with China, sir. Is that cool? Oh, no, absolutely not. Greenland, that's a red line. But Canada, schmanada. Who cares about Canada? Get a deal with China for all I care, says Trump. It's one of those things that makes me feel like maybe... it's like when you're talking with a girlfriend or a wife or something like that, and there's a little, disagreement, and then a few minutes later you're like, "Are you mad?" And she's like, "Nope," and you know that she is mad, but she's not telling you why, or you don't know why she's mad, and you're not finding out why she's mad, and so I could guess about why Trump might be mad, but it's weird for him to not care about this, yet say Greenland is absolutely 100% necessary for national security. But Canada, yeah, they can be run by China. I don't care. The Emergencies Act was illegal, and that's where we're going to start today. Nobody's going to be arrested. Nothing is going to happen. Chrystia Freeland can run the Rhodes Scholar thing and all of the other jobs, be the economic advisor to Zelensky. Who cares about, her leveraging her old job to get this other job and that being against the rules and a 2-year burn down period? Nobody cares. Nobody cares, apparently. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to enforce anything. If people get really upset, they might charge her with a violation of an ethics law, which is a ceremonial slap on the wrist and a $500 fine. And I'm only kidding about the ceremonial slap on the wrist. They don't actually have that. I just wish they did. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with the Emergencies Act, and it is illegal, and we all knew it was illegal, but here we are years later, and nobody will be held accountable. And yeah, we find out it was illegal. They couldn't do that. And yet, all the people charged, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they will not be made whole, although Right Blend goes through kind of the implications of this in just a minute. Here's Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. They say, the Justice Center welcomes today's decision of the Federal Court of Appeal, which affirms the lower court's ruling that the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act against peaceful protesters in Ottawa in February of 2022 was illegal. Lawyers funded by the Justice Center were on the ground in Ottawa throughout all 3 weeks of the Peaceful Freedom Convoy protest in January and February 22, observing events as they unfolded and providing legal support to Canadians exercising their charter freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. Justice Center President John Carpe said, this decision confirms what Canadians witnessed in real time in 2022. The Emergencies Act was never meant to be used against peaceful citizens exercising their fundamental freedoms. Read the full release there. So good. It's good that we're seeing this kind of legal outcome. Jeffrey Rath says, where's the real accountability? Shouldn't Trudeau be arrested? Federal government loses Emergency Act appeal. Court says use during the convoy protest was unreasonable. So unreasonable. So nobody's going to be arrested for unreasonably using the law. So sorry about your luck, Canadians. They got away again, right? So we need the Scooby Gang to be investigating. Matt Strauss is talking about this as well. He says the Liberal government, egged on by Mark Carney, violated the charter rights as they claim to serve or to revere. In particular, they violated the fundamental freedom to expression protected by Section 2 and the freedom from unreasonable seizure protected by Section 8 of the Charter. This is now a matter of fact established by 2 separate federal courts. Will the Liberals now apologizing for violating basic rights of Canadians? No, they absolutely will not, because they still believe that they didn't do anything wrong. This is Right Blend, he says, a clarification for folks. While it's very good news that the federal court and the Federal Court of Appeal has ruled that Trudeau illegally used the Emergencies Act and illegally froze bank accounts, this does not mean that those who were charged during the Freedom Convoy will be freed and made whole. The criminal charges were laid under the Criminal Code. In fact, that is what Justice Mosley ruled and was upheld today, that other tools existed to deal with the protests. The courts found that Trudeau invoking Canada's version of martial law was not legally necessary nor legally justified per the requirements of the Emergencies Act. However, it does mean individuals directly impacted by the unlawfully frozen bank accounts ordered under the Ultra Vires Emergencies Act can proceed with their lawsuits against the government. The outcome of those lawsuits depends on each individual circumstances. So what now? The government can appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, the highest court in the country. Chief Justice of Canada Richard Wagner made extraordinarily inappropriate and political comments during the protests that entirely prejudice him. Should the government decide to waste more of our money and fight this in the Supreme Court of Canada, Wagner should and ought to wholly recuse himself from the case. The whole Supreme Court of Canada is a compromised entity. I think our entire legal system is a compromised entity, by the way. So I'm not expecting anything from our courts, because our courts are corrupt. Senator Housakis is responding to the National Post. National Post says, update, the federal government has lost its appeal on a ruling by the federal court that found the invocation of the Emergencies Act during the 22 Freedom Convoy protest was unjustified. Senator Housakis says, today the court confirmed what we knew from the very beginning. The federal Liberal government's invocation of the Emergencies Act was unnecessary, overreaching, and unlawful, a shameful moment for Canada. Yeah, and the shameful moments just keep piling up, right? How about that? China. Here is Mark Carney, and he's being asked here, what did you mean, sir, by New World Order? And he goes into a very long word salady explanation of a reset financial system, a world financial system. He's talking about all sorts of different facets, and I don't think so. I don't buy this tap dance, but this is a liberal tap dancing away. So here we go.
Next question, Brian.
Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg News. Yesterday when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was this partnership with Canada and China, this new partnership, sets us up well for the New World Order. What did you mean by that? What is the New World Order?
Well, it's a great question, Brian, because I think the world is still determining what that order is going to be. And let's be clear what we're talking about first and foremost, which is what are the trading, what is going to govern global trade? What is the role of the WTO going to be? How important are bilateral deals such as the one we're developing? Plurilateral deals, if I can use that term, Trans-Pacific Partnership, the potential linkages between Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Sorry, I was saying his answer doesn't, thank you for telling me that the audio was muted. I apologize, I was blowing my nose. His answer does not speak to the question asked of him. He was asked exactly how does our position with China give us a good position in the New World Order, and he pivots away to all of this WTO, World Trade Organization nonsense, blah, 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 blah. And so I just don't feel like it is, it doesn't answer the question asked. He's just throwing words out there in an attempt to confuse you. And again, that's what I call the liberal tap dance.
And the EU, where is financial regulation, payment system regulation going to fit into that? All of these aspects.
He's talking about digital ID and central bank digital currency there.
I'm use a fancy word, like the architecture, the multilateral system that has been developing these is being eroded, to use a polite term, undercut, use another term. So the question is,
eroded and undercut. He's talking here about Trump and the change of the international trade system with regards to tariffs for access to the United States market, and Trump talking about cutting off the deficits and the trade deficit between Canada and the United States, and the trade deficit between the United States and Europe, and so on and so forth. That's what he's talking about here. And so, yeah, again, I don't think this speaks to the question that he's asked.
what gets built in that place? How much of a patchwork is it? How much is it just on a bilateral basis? Or where do like-minded countries in certain areas? So like-minded countries, just to be clear, doesn't mean you agree on everything. Aspects, for example, on digital trade or agricultural trade. Climate finance as another area. To move into areas of geostrategy, geosecurity, you will have different coalitions that are formed. So what this partnership does is in areas, for example, of clean energy, conventional energy, agriculture, as we were just talking about, and financial services, which we've talked less about, but the evolution of the global financial system, the role of the renminbi over time, the evolution of cross-border payments. I know it all sounds very dry, except for your organization, which I think takes an interest in it. These are important elements of how the system is going to work. And look, the expectation is that rather than these being developed necessarily through the IMF, WTO, and other multilateral organizations, it is going to be coalitions that develop them, not for the world, but for subsectors of the world.
Expression.
So Canada's positioned well for the New World Order because they're going to build digital currencies for subsectors, and we want to build a digital currency with China and Canada and not the United States. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense unless he's being very plain and just saying the plan out loud, which maybe CBC Watcher CBC Watcher is highlighting a different part of this question and answer, and this is Mark Carney answering, hey, like you recently said, China is a big security threat. Is it not a security threat anymore? And again, a little bit of a word salad. Here we go.
New Prime Minister, less than a year ago, you said that China was the biggest security threat to Canada. Do you still believe that?
The security landscape continues to change. And in a world that's more dangerous and divided, we face many threats.
All the time with this world that's more dangerous and divided, and he can't get through this without saying every second word.
That's more dangerous and divided. We face many threats. That's the reality. And the job, my responsibilities as Prime Minister, the job of the government, is to manage those threats. You manage those threats by building resilience, building security. You manage those threats through alliances. You manage those threats through engagement. And we're pursuing all of those. And I would say that, the threat environment has increased. The risks have multiplied. So too has our resilience and our engagement, which is
way more risk, but we're way more engaged, so exposed to that risk.
Protecting Canadians on balance.
But does that
No.
threat from
Next
China still
question.
exist?
I'll refer to my previous answer.
Does the threat from China exist? Yeah, you heard what I just said, right? Not a very good answer. And he knows it. Here's BRICS News, and they say, just in, European Union to block Chinese suppliers from critical infrastructure. So there you go. And the details of that, like I'm not exactly sure what critical infrastructure they're blocking Chinese suppliers from. There were some places. Well, here's another example: Israel. Andy Lee says the Israeli Military of Defense has officially suspended the supply of Chinese electric vehicles from BYD to IDF officers due to concerns over data collection via embedded communication systems and sensors. These are the cars that Mark Carney just made an agreement to bring into Canada as well. So Andy Lee says, just reposting this for no particular reason. There are other situations where buses that were purchased by municipalities, I think, that were from China had all sorts of, they had kill switches and they had all sorts of concerning technology that people were concerned about due to, if you have all of this infrastructure and then say there's a disagreement or something like that, China could potentially turn off all of your buses with the push of a button. And so that exposes you to risk that is unacceptable, probably. Pierre Poilievre says Prime Minister Carney must explain how he's gone from saying China was Canada's biggest security threat before the election to announcing a strategic partnership with Beijing after the election. His agreement will allow 50,000 EVs onto our streets, jeopardizing our security and auto jobs. This follows him breaking his promise to negotiate a win to get a deal with the U.S. by last July. Despite giving $1 billion taxpayer loan for Beijing to build our ships, there is no guarantee that tariffs on canola or other Canadian goods will permanently, immediately, or completely be eliminated. Meanwhile, Canadian pork farmers will still be paying a 25% tariff. It's time for Canadians to have a government that will put our country first and protect our security, our jobs, and our sovereignty. It's a darn shame that Pierre Poilievre hid Andrew Scheer behind the curtains to pass the Liberal budget. Why'd you do that, Pierre Poilievre? And also, he voted with the Liberals against the other parties in December, and I can't remember the details, but Max was talking about that, and he'll tell us on the Kitchen Table Talk tomorrow. So it's one of those things where I have a hard time believing. It's like watching Jagmeet Singh operate again. You know, like they're having this shadow boxing thing, and we're supposed to believe that, oh yeah, you know, Pierre Poilievre made a good point, and he's really punching and attacking the Liberals and making lots of headway and convincing people and stuff, but he's not. And even if he was, he wouldn't do anything different than what Mark Carney's doing right now. So I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. John Carter says if Canada wants to preserve its sovereignty as the American empire embraces naked assertion of national interests unbound from international law, courting China is just about the most retarded thing you could do. The theory behind this is that expanded trade with China will insulate the Canadian economy from U.S. tariffs. This is stupid. China accounts for 4% of Canadian exports. The U.S. accounts for 70 to 75%. That all makes sense if you look at a map. Canada doesn't have the port facilities to ship energy to China in any appreciable quantity. Canada isn't going to build these facilities in a timely fashion, not without walking all over First Nations and the climate lunatics, both of whom Carney and his Liberal Party are enthusiastically beholden to. Even assuming we did build those facilities and start shipping oil to China in vast quantities, it would be the easiest thing in the world for the U.S. Navy to interdict those tankers, just like in Venezuela, and there would be precisely nothing the all but non-existent Royal Canadian Navy could do about it but cry. Meanwhile, Turbo America is reasserting the Monroe Doctrine, which is the Western Hemisphere. We control the Western Hemisphere. Leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone, basically. But they were all over the Middle East and Asia, so they weren't adhering to the Monroe Doctrine either. Back to this. Specifically, in order to eliminate Chinese influence from the Western Hemisphere, cozying up to Beijing at this point is a bad look and really not worth whatever value we get from a few thousand shitty Chinese EVs nobody wants. The best strategy for Canada to persevere or preserve its sovereignty during this crisis is the same strategy that is successfully used since the War of 1812. 1, be well defended. 2, be friendly. There's no possibility of Canada actually winning a war with the United States, but it is possible to make such a war difficult enough that the blood isn't worth the prize. At the same time, if the country is a well-governed, cooperative, reliable ally, then there's no particular advantage to annexation, right? But we're not a well-governed, cooperative, or reliable ally. We're bad actors and getting worse. What's going on, China? And Trump doesn't seem to care. He's like, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. Instead, Ottawa has settled on the most retarded of all possible strategies, one being defenseless, and two, belligerent. The Canadian Armed Forces is a joke, and while Carney has made noises about building them up again, the effort is sabotaged by DEI bullshit, and the modest increase in budget is nowhere near the tripling that would be required to match the U.S. Department of War spending on a per capita GDP-adjusted basis, especially when you start from way, way, way behind. Meanwhile, Ottawa takes every opportunity to antagonize the Yanks, courting foreign adversaries Washington wants out of the hemisphere, flooding the country with third world biotrash, letting the real estate market be used as a massive money laundering scheme, winking at fentanyl labs, shrugging at foreign influence, penetrating every level of government. The Trump administration looks at this mess and concludes that one, Canada would be very easily annexed, and two, the country is so poorly run that it would probably be more profitable to govern directly. Again, I don't disagree with that assessment. There's so much wrong. Put another way, there's so much wrong with Canada and how we're governed right now, from the Senate to the corruption at every level to the breakdown of our institutions, policing, courts, things like that, replacing everybody at this point would be better. Although it doesn't sound like Trump is interested in all of that. Back to this. And as all of this is going on, the Laurentians lose no opportunity to remind anyone who will listen that Canada is built on stolen native land, from which it follows that our official national position is that our sovereignty is completely illegitimate. The country is in the hands of delusional, traitorous clowns at precisely the worst possible historical moment. And to make it all the more absurd, they've successfully wrapped themselves in the flag to such a degree that any criticism of their suicidal policies is called unpatriotic maple MAGA by the legions of trained clapping seals comprising the country's delirious overburden of CBC-addled baby boomers. Now, again, I think that you need a small group of loud people to make it seem like there's a majority there, or make it seem like there are a lot more numbers than there are. And so I think we're seeing something like that, but those people do exist. I've seen them. Melissa Shen is talking about Mark Carney. Mark Carney says, a pleasure to meet with President Xi Jinping. This is yesterday. Canada and China are forging a new strategic partnership. We're leveraging our strengths, focusing on trade, energy, agriculture, seafood, and other areas where we can make massive gains for both our people. And Melissa Shen says, the United States says we can't let China get a foothold in the Arctic. Canada says, foothold, brother Xi, come into America's backyard and make yourself right at home. And Trump doesn't care. Like, he just doesn't. Maybe it's here. How far away is it? Trump. Here he is. This is Trump on the Carney deal. I feel like there's more to this. The Trump administration has said that they don't support this deal, and I'll get into that in the second part of the show. But here's Trump himself. Yesterday, he was asked by a reporter, and he says, "I don't care. It's cool." I'm sure that once he realizes or reads, or somebody reads him in on the details of the deal, he may have a different opinion of this. But as of now, the prediction I made yesterday, which was that Trump was going to be upset by this and was going to threaten Canada with something that was going to make Canada change its position, I was wrong. Totally wrong. So apparently Trump, cool, man. You guys got to do what you got to do. Have fun, Canada. And he really genuinely doesn't seem bothered. Here we go.
Mr. President, Prime Minister Carney is in China. Prime Minister Carney is in China. How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
It's not much of a deal. That's the quote. That's the whole thing that Trump says. If he can get a deal with China, then he should get that deal. The deal is kind of crappy. There's no guarantees. Basically, the guarantee is we give them space. We give them 49,000 electric cars coming in, and they might take that canola. Maybe, kind of, sort of, maybe, if they're feeling in the mood. So with that, we've got to say goodbye to the stream. There's lots more, even just talking about China, there's lots more, but lots more show as well. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. I'll be around tomorrow, and we are doing the Kitchen Table Talk tomorrow. So if you are on the list, I'll be sending the email, usual time, 1 o'clock, and 1 o'clock Toronto time. And so thanks for watching, everybody.